Hello, America. Welcome to your Leo Nation. I am the Chief, Mark Garrett. I'm going to jump right into this story because it's about the biggest story in America right now, and that is the jury decision on the Donald Trump case in beautiful New York City. You know, this is the place where we believe in and support the rule of law, and we have definitely not seen the rule of law practiced in this particular case and in a lot of other cases that we will get to. But again, I want to dive right into this because it's complicated for a lot of people. I've watched, read, and listened to a lot of people about this case over the last really kind of year since Donald Trump was indicted. So I want to dive right into this. And one of the first questions is what is Trump? What has he actually been found quote unquote guilty of? What was the charge? And to kind of illustrate how how empty this entire process has been, how nefarious, how unfair, and how much in disregard for the rule of law this has been. I want you to watch this clip. This is from Pierce Morgan, and he has a whole panel of pundits on here. And I want you to listen to this clip right now with one of the pundits in regards to what was the actual charge.
I would challenge her to see if she could possibly articulate how and what crime Trump committed, because so far Alvin Bragg, the DA, has failed to do so. The judge in the case, Judge Merchan, has failed to do so. And they can't do it because Trump didn't commit any of the crimes for which he's been convicted.
Well, let's just ask quickly before I go to Kevin. Francesca, just on that point, what crime did Trump commit?
It was financial crimes. It was white collar crimes. That is exactly
Which
what
one,
they
though?
charged him. He was convicted on.
What was the crime?
It's New York State law.
I understand. What was the crime?
It is New.
Francesca,
I don't even like it. It is
Well,
literally
hang on, Mark,
he just got convicted on 34 counts.
Francesca, what was the crime?
Of like cooking the actual books.
What was the crime?
You are not allowed. So you are not allowed to use your own financial, like your own money, to pay off somebody, and then he logged it as something different. He logged it as just a regular payment, but he was actually paying off this porn star to keep quiet, which, if he hadn't been running for president, would not have mattered, but he was, and so it impacted campaign finance laws in New York State. Okay, that is what Juan Merchan just oversaw this.
Okay,
Alvin Bragg brought these charges because Michael Cohen, his fixer, was already sentenced to 3 years to do it.
Okay, let's just go before Kevin. I'll be very, very, very patient.
But
We'll come to you.
Look, I'm no expert. Let me just say, hang on,
No,
Michael.
Francesca.
You are no expert.
By the
That's
way.
right, because the campaign finance law is a federal
wait.
law.
Hang on,
Anyway,
Francesca. I want to go to Mark. You're the lawyer. Is anything Francesca just said, is that actually the crime?
Look, let me just say, I like Francesca a lot, and we probably agree on 80% of our worldviews. However, Francesca, the way you just described it, call me afterwards and I'll educate you, because that's not what happened. There was no theory that was given to the jurors. The jurors were told it could have been campaign finance, it could have been tax, it could have been false books. They were told they didn't have to specify, and specifically told they did not have to agree unanimously. That's what irks me. Lifelong Democrat, no fan of Trump, never voted for Trump, never will. But I will tell you, as somebody who has spent his entire career kind of taking on unpopular causes and holding the government accountable, I have to tell you, I do that for a reason. And the reason is this kind of shenanigans, and that's the best light I can spin it on, in the criminal courts, has no place in a federal election.
No, I agree.
The campaign finance laws were federal, not state, and the state laws had nothing to do with it.
I want to.
Now, I think that kind of exemplifies the people who are so happy, they're so giddy about Trump being found guilty of whatever it was. This person here is supposed to know what the hell she's talking about, cannot begin to articulate exactly what it was supposedly the guilt that Trump was found guilty of. I got to give Mark Geragos credit there. Mark Geragos, by the way, who made it clear he's never voted for Trump. He'll never vote for Trump. He hopes by all means that Trump is never elected president again. And he said, this is completely ridiculous. He's an intellectually honest, man, at least in this regard, from what I can tell, watched him for a number of years. I rarely agree with him on his political and his philosophical positions, but here he made it clear that this is a kangaroo court, kangaroo trial, kangaroo judge, kangaroo everything, and a complete miscarriage of justice. So let me refer to some notes I made here. Like I said, I am not a constitutional scholar. I'm not a lawyer, never went to law school, but I can read, I can listen to people, I can learn, and I've been in a lot of courtrooms. So I've listened to instructions from judges over my 30 years in law enforcement in criminal and civil cases. So I am not unfamiliar with the court process, again, whether it's criminal or civil. I'm pretty well versed at how things work in a courtroom, even if I was never trained as a lawyer. I've been exposed to it. But I made some notes. Again, a lot of the notes I took here are from things that I've learned by listening and reading to people who are experts in the law. So let me just go right down the line here. Try and make this clear. We've already identified the fact that most people, nobody can really identify exactly what it is Trump was charged with, what crime he committed. So this whole thing about paying somebody off, paying someone to keep quiet. Listen, it's called an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. For whatever reason, companies do it all the time. Individuals do it all the time. This is a more than common practice, and I'll get into that with some examples over the years. So there's nothing illegal about that. So supposedly he was charged with falsifying a business record, which by itself in New York is a misdemeanor, and that statute of limitations expired years ago. So the only way that Alvin Bragg could actually resurrect whatever charges he wanted to or make them up was to do just that. And that was to say that the quote unquote falsified in business records was done to cover up another crime. We don't know what that is. Bragg never told us what that crime was. The judge never told us what that crime was. Nothing. Does anybody, and listen, hit me with some emails, some text, whatever it is. You let me know what the other crime was that was covered up supposedly by the supposed falsification of business records. What was the other crime that was covered up? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. These are the notes that I made here. And the judge, when he gave the jury their instructions about this being a felony because Donald Trump covered up another underlying crime with the falsification of business records, he said it could be a tax violation, it could be a campaign finance violation, it could be a New York State election law violation. The judge told jurors that they do not have to be unanimous about what the underlying crime was. Now, there are a lot of lefties out there, a lot of so-called pundits. I guess they are pundits, but they're morons. They have gone on air and said that people are misrepresenting what the judge said, that the jury didn't have to be unanimous to convict Trump. That's not what the judge said. And that's not what the Trump lawyers have said. What the judge said was that the jurors do not have to be unanimous on what the underlying crime was that supposedly Trump and his team covered up with the so-called falsified documents. Now, if this sounds a little bit convoluted and confusing to you, I can understand why. This should indicate to anybody with an open mind about how much work, to what extent Alvin Bragg went to develop this cockamamie, ridiculous, ludicrous charge against Donald Trump. By the way, this particular charge, really whatever it was, to my understanding, has never been charged, has never been brought in the state of New York. Never. Of all of the countless numbers of businessmen and women in New York, this particular charge has never been brought. Now, again, if someone wants to correct me, I'm totally open to being corrected, and here it is. But from my knowledge, it's never been brought. So again, just to recap here, this was a misdemeanor if he did falsify documents. And by the way, what did he falsify documents? Supposedly that he wrote down business expenses for reimbursing his lying lawyer. We know who he is. I won't even mention his name. For paying somebody not to make the claim that they had a sexual relation with Donald Trump. That is not illegal. And he noted on there that that was a business expense. That is a business expense. That's exactly what it was. Whether or not her accusation is true is completely irrelevant. Trump, for whatever reason, and many people have a good reason, not to have someone make the accusation in the public sphere that XYZ happened. Sometimes the accusation is true, sometimes it's not. But the point is, people want them not to put that out there for obvious reasons. That's all there is to it. But again, to make this a felony, that business expense had to have been to cover up another crime, which makes the entire thing a felony. And again, the judge could not even tell the jury that they had to be unanimous. In fact, he told them they didn't have to be unanimous on whatever that other possible crime was. Again, this is confusing because it had to be manipulated. This had to be concocted by this person, this DA, Alvin Bragg, to even get this into the courtroom. Like I said, it's never been brought to my knowledge. Now, here's what I want to finish on. And there are a lot of constitutional issues with this case. There are so many. With the Fifth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and another one, the Sixth Amendment. And again, the Fifth Amendment and 14th Amendment issues are huge. And again, I'm not a constitutional, authority, but again, I can read. So one thing I want to talk about is the Sixth Amendment. And the Sixth Amendment, and this has been vetted out by the Supreme Court, the Sixth Amendment, I'm paraphrasing here just to summarize, the Sixth Amendment says that a defendant has the constitutional right to know what they're being charged with specifically. And when I say the Supreme Court has vetted this out in a case years ago, that includes any underlying crimes that make another crime a felony, exactly what Bragg's trying to do here. So the Constitution, the Sixth Amendment specifically requires that Donald Trump and his lawyers have to know what crime it is that he's being charged with that make this a felony, and they never were. They had never have been. Nobody listening to the show, nobody anywhere can tell me what the underlying crime was. It was never articulated, not in the indictment, not in the opening statements of the trial, not in the jury instructions from the judge, and not when the jury brought the verdict back. It's never been identified. It's never been specified what the supposed crime was. And the Sixth Amendment and Supreme Court are clear on this. This is one of multiple reasons this case is going to be overturned. There's no question about it. It's going to be completely thrown out eventually. But of course, the whole point is the left, the Biden team, they don't care if it's thrown out. They want this to be the scarlet letter on Donald Trump, convicted felon. That's what they want going into this final stage of the campaign for 2024. So when we talk about the rule of law on this show, and again, I've done tons of research on this case, and I could talk about it for the next 2 or 3 hours. I won't do that. The point is that I think anybody, again, with a fair, open, objective mind, like Mark Geragos, who hates Trump, like Alan Dershowitz, who I won't use the word hate, but does, and by the way, that goes for Geragos. I don't really hate Trump, but they are political adversaries of Trump, and Alan Dershowitz, and so many other people who say this is an absolute miscarriage of justice. This is an abomination of the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. This is not Mark Garrett speaking. This is not the Donald Trump communications team. These are people who do not want Trump in office, but have the intellectual honesty to say that this is undermining what? The rule of law, the United States Constitution. Because if they do it to Trump, they can do it to anybody. And we lose the reason that the United States of America is unique in world history. We lose our true representative constitutional democracy if we live in a country where, quote unquote, find me the man, I'll find you the crime. That's exactly what's happened to Donald Trump. And by the way, it's not just his case. He's got 3 other cases going on right now. Probably won't go to court at this point before the election, but this one did. And now they stuck this scarlet letter on his head, just like they wanted to try to use this against him during the campaign. So like I said, we could spend hours and hours deep diving into the Trump trial in New York right now. But what I want to do is just go back in time a little bit. Let's just take a little trip back in time. And the reason I want to do this, people will say, oh, here you go. You're going to do, they didn't do this or did do that person and blah, 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 whatever, and compare this to other people. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And the reason, ladies and gentlemen, is because we can't do that. If we can't do that, if we can't show where other people have not been held accountable for, in my opinion, far worse transgressions, and we can't do that, then we don't have any perspective. We don't have any perspective about right or wrong, about objectivity in the judicial system. We have to compare and contrast. Otherwise, we don't have any perspective. We're mindless people just working off pure emotion. I love this candidate, so he or she can do anything they want to. I hate that candidate, so we have to get them at every turn possible. We can't operate like that. So with that said, let me just go back, like I said, in time a little bit here. And I want to talk about, actually, this one here I have opened up. And right now, I'll get to my handwritten notes and articles here in a second. So let's go back to 8. I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing when all the story was breaking. And of course, you know, I'm gonna bring up right now. And that is one William Jefferson. Yes, Thomas Jefferson rolls in his grave every time he finds out that his last name is Bill Clinton's middle name. Jefferson Clinton. And not specifically about the fact, because they're not allegations, because later on he admitted to the relationship with Monica Lewinsky. That's bad enough on a moral level, an ethical level. And if we gauged everybody in politics on their personal life, their personal ethics and morals, things like that, we'd have very, very few people ever getting elected if that were the benchmark. We all agree on that. We all know it's the case. And that's true for all of us. But in relation to Monica Lewinsky, I'm talking about what Clinton did, what Bill Clinton did under oath. And that is a completely different topic. So let me just go down here a little bit. And why do I bring this up? Again, it is to compare and contrast about what happened to one person to what's happening to Donald Trump. Again, 1998, independent counsel Kenneth W. Starr's report to Congress alleged that President Clinton committed perjury, obstructed justice, tampered with witnesses, and abused power. On the 11 counts laid out by Starr, 5 alleged that Clinton lied under oath in his January 17th deposition in the Paula Jones case, and again in the August 17th grand jury. By the way, speaking of Paula Jones, I made a note to myself, get the number right. Paula Jones. Bill Clinton paid Paula Jones $800,000 to keep quiet, ladies and gentlemen. $800,000. By the way, this is back in the late 1990s. And by the way, it was totally legal. From a legal point of view, I have no problem with that. He wasn't charged with any crime when he paid off. And by the way, I don't know if he called it business expenses or what he called it, but people thought, oh, this is hush money, hush money. Hush money, so to speak, is an everyday occurrence in this country. It's legal. He paid her $800,000 to keep quiet. So those of you who don't remember this or don't know it or are too young to have known it, I want you to compare and contrast when people try to slander Donald Trump for paying off this wreck of a person, Stormy Daniels, to keep quiet about her allegations. Compare and contrast that to the $800,000 26 years ago that Bill Clinton paid this lady. So beyond that, let me just take a look here and read these to you. Count one, this is from Ken Starr. Count one, President Clinton lied under oath in his civil case when he denied a sexual affair, a sexual relationship, or sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky. Count two, President Clinton lied under oath to the grand jury about his sexual relationship with Miss Lewinsky. Count three, in his civil deposition to support his false statement about the sexual relationship. By the way, you talk about layering crimes one on top of the other. I'll repeat this. In his civil deposition to support his false statement about the sexual relationship, President Clinton also lied under oath about being alone with Miss Lewinsky and about the many gifts exchanged between Miss Lewinsky and him. Count four, President Clinton lied under oath in his civil deposition about his discussions with Miss Lewinsky concerning her involvement in the Jones case. This is Paula Jones, who he paid $800,000 to keep quiet about what he did with her. And some say to her. And two other women, by the way. 8, President Clinton lied under oath in his civil deposition about his discussions with Vernon Jordan concerning Miss Lewinsky's involvement in the Jones case. Witness tampering, ladies and gentlemen. Obstruction of justice. This man committed more crimes than the biggest detractor of Donald Trump could ever pray that he might commit. Fast forward with Bill Clinton. What happened to him? He lost his law license for a while. He agreed to do X, Y, Z and to not be prosecuted. The point is, he wasn't prosecuted for any of these felonies, multiple felonies, clear cut. And why are they clear cut? They're clear cut because there was overwhelming evidence from Monica Lewinsky, physical evidence that I won't get into. And eventually, of course, and ultimately, he admitted that he had lied under oath multiple times. So we know for a fact that Bill Clinton committed multiple felonies, and straight to the point. Not this convoluted, not this created, this cobbled together crap that Alvin Bragg did, but these are straightforward, specific, narrow, to the point felonies that he committed. What is my point to all this? Those people today who hate Donald Trump, who say, oh, he's a convicted felon, so he shouldn't be allowed to run for office and so forth and so on. If Bill Clinton could drag his decrepit ass back into the political arena legally and run for a third term, these same people would vote for Bill Clinton as fast as they could, and as many times as they could in certain states, in my opinion. We all know it to be true. So these people who talk about Trump is now a convicted felon, which he's not convicted yet. He won't be convicted until sentencing, but that's a different story. They are, of course, disingenuous, to put it mildly, because we know that they would vote for Bill Clinton. By the way, I think any Democrat would vote for Bill Clinton today based on what they have in the Oval Office and who their current candidate is. So that's example number one of people engaging in obvious violations of law, multiple felonies, multiple NDAs, paying people off to be quiet, and who did not go to prison, who were not convicted of felonies. By the way, I was not a big fan of people 26 years ago who actually wanted to prosecute Bill Clinton, because as much as I disagreed with Bill Clinton philosophically, politically, a lot of people, most people who are objective, realize that going after political opponents can have some very, very significant repercussions for the country. And we're seeing this now. We're seeing this now. I want you to think about this. Everybody prosecuting Donald Trump is from one party. Is from one party. There was an opposition party, just like there always is when Bill Clinton engaged in this behavior. And he didn't face any local, state, or federal charges for these violations. And he damn could have, and he didn't. I think because people, a lot of people, enough people, the right people had read history, who understood the repercussions of engaging in political prosecution. By the way, I don't even think this would have been political prosecution or persecution. It would have just simply been a legal process, but it certainly would have been seen as political persecution and prosecution. And they let him slide. And I'm fine with that for the bigger picture, because I want people, no matter what level they are, and especially, quite frankly, if they're running for office or in office, to be treated fairly and understand that when they leave office, they're not going to be held accountable for decisions they have to make while they're in office. They have to be able to do their job. I'm digressing a little bit, but I said there's so much to this. We could talk for hours and hours and hours about it. So let's move forward a little bit in time to one of our favorite people who just happens to be, I won't say related, because I guess they're not actually kin, but they're related in the sense that they are married to one another, at least on paper. And that is the lovely Hillary Clinton. Yep. I'm going to talk about that too, because if you want to talk about Donald Trump, then you have to talk about other presidential candidates and behavior in which they engaged. So let me read this article to you. This is from publication Long Crime. This is 8 years ago, 2016. FBI Director James Comey testified on Thursday before Congress about his decision to recommend that Hillary Clinton should not be criminally prosecuted for her use of private email server while serving as a Secretary of State. Here are the most revealing moments from FBI Director Comey's testimony in no particular order. Now, I want you to think about this, ladies and gentlemen. July of 2016. Gee, what was going on then? Talk about election interference today. Prosecuting. Oh, I know. There was another election going on. Another election going on. One in which Hillary Clinton was a Democrat nominee. Do you think that James Comey, who states all the time, I just watched him 2 days ago, saying how much he detests Donald Trump, how much he wants to see Donald Trump put in a double wide, quote unquote, at some federal prison out in the grass, away from the other inmates, that it could be done. This is how much this man detests Donald Trump. And I'm so glad that Donald Trump fired him in 2017, but James Comey will go to his grave with a vendetta against Donald Trump. And that started before Comey was fired. Clearly. Do you think that James Comey had any motivation to help Hillary Clinton in 2016? It's kind of a rhetorical question, but let me read from this. So, one of the first reasons that Comey gave for not recommending criminal prosecution against Hillary Clinton, and again, this goes back to the server, the emails, lying under oath, quite frankly. But number one, gross negligence was not a key determination in deciding whether to bring charges in this case. The FBI director explained that the statute with quote unquote gross negligence was never really considered in this case because of a fear that in the Department of Justice, that it was possibly unconstitutional. Now, again, this is another one we could spend days on, the whole email server that was private email server. Look, I was the chief of the California Highway Patrol. Can you imagine what would have happened to me had I set up a private email server in my home to run California Highway Patrol correspondence through? Can you imagine the number of confidential information I had on my state computer? Internal investigations, criminal investigations. Can you imagine the amount of confidential information? And can you imagine what would have happened to me had that been going through a Gmail account or a Yahoo account or a Hotmail account on a personal server that I bought over at Radio Shack? Can you imagine what would have happened to me? I can. This is what Hillary Clinton was doing. And she was Secretary of State. Why do I harp on this, ladies and gentlemen? Because without history, without comparison, without contrast, we cannot move forward. We cannot see what's happening to Donald Trump for what it is. It's political persecution. So let me move on. This is Comey. There was a statute passed in 1917 that on its face makes it a crime, a felony, for someone to engage in gross negligence. So that would appear to say maybe it's enough to prove they were just really careless beyond a reasonable doubt. I have no idea what the hell I just read. But this is what Comey said, explaining why he did not recommend prosecution for Hillary Clinton. Because of basically we couldn't prove gross negligence, or we're not sure what the Constitution says about. That's not your job, James Comey. Your job was to be a fact finder and to present that to the special counsel. That's what your job was. Not to hold back, not to influence the investigation, just a fact finder, just like I did for so many hundreds of criminal investigations I was involved in. You write down the facts and you present them to the DA or the city attorney. Later in his testimony, Director Comey expanded on these concerns and said there was a fear that the statute was unconstitutional. What do you mean there was a fear the statute was on? That's none of your business. That's not your concern. It's a statute or a statute. This is my point, ladies and gentlemen. Even in his slimy little slithering way, trying to get around prosecuting or recommending prosecution for Hillary Clinton, he had to admit there was a statute on the books about gross negligence. And he's trying to avoid applying that statute to Hillary Clinton in this convoluted, meandering way. You contrast that to just the opposite with Alvin Bragg. He had to cobble together all of these non-existent, unrelated elements to bring this bogus felony charge against Donald Trump. It's just the opposite. 2, Hillary Clinton was, this is my favorite of all this. Matter of fact, I'm going to say I may stop, but there's so much here. Hillary Clinton was not, quote unquote, sophisticated enough to understand the classification system. Then Congressman Ron DeSantis asked Director Comey to address the emails found on Clinton's server that contained classified markings. Quote, that information you found, would somebody sophisticated in those manners, should this have been obvious that this was sensitive information? Congressman DeSantis asked. Quote, I just want to take one of your assumptions about quote unquote sophistication, Comey said. I don't think our investigation established she was particularly sophisticated with respect to classified information and the levels and treatment. He called Hillary Clinton a dum-dum. He says she was not smart enough. She wasn't bright enough. She wasn't sophisticated enough to know what the labels that said top secret or classified or whatever it may be. She wasn't bright enough to understand what those things meant. This is James Comey, ladies and gentlemen. This is DeSantis. Isn't she an original classification authority, though? DeSantis asked. In other words, she's the boss. She's the top of the food chain at the State Department, the Secretary of State, who reports directly to the Commander-in-Chief, Barack Obama at the time. Isn't she an original classification authority, though, DeSantis asked? Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Comey responded. Good grief, DeSantis said. And I say good grief, too. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm imploring you to look at these things, to understand how in one case, one example, and there are many, but this particular example, Hillary Clinton, an official, the FBI director, goes out of his way to twist, to contort, to avoid elements of behavior in order to exonerate someone, in this case, Hillary Clinton, for clearly felonious behavior. And you compare and contrast that to what Alvin Bragg did to persecute his political opponent, and what the judge did to make sure the jury, by all means possible, could come back with the verdict that they did. There's so much here, but I'm going to leave it at that. I want you to leave it at that with Hillary Clinton, that James Comey had to go and say, didn't have to, he chose to say that Hillary Clinton was too dumb to figure out that these emails were classified. Again, going back to my time at the Highway Patrol, I would get information all the time that was stamped confidential, and some top, bottom, red, a lot. You can imagine as a chief how much of that kind of information that I got. I'm not very sophisticated, but apparently I'm brighter than Hillary Clinton. Finally, the DOJ. Now, this is from Reuters. This is from 4 years ago. DOJ declines to prosecute Comey despite finding that he leaked information. So I'm using these three people, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, James Comey, on purpose. There are others, but for one, they're all very prominent, like Donald Trump is. They're all very influential, like Donald Trump is. And in this case, there's a string of corruption between the three of them, from one to the other to the next. Now, what's so important? There's a lot important about this. First of all, like I tell you all the time, I try to use sources that may not be favorable to my political beliefs, my political positions, philosophies. Reuters is no friend of most things that I believe in. Let me tell you right now. So that's why I used it. Again, this is from 4 years ago, 2019, August of 2019. Now, who was president in 2019? Now, let me see. Joe Biden. Was he getting? Oh, yeah, it was Donald Trump. Donald Trump was president in 2019. Why did I bring that up? Because it was Donald Trump's DOJ, Donald Trump's Department of Justice, that declined to prosecute Comey. Now, let me backtrack, and this is off the top of my head. No notes here, because it just, again, there's so much here. Comey knew, we know from the record now, Comey knew that the allegations against Donald Trump with the Russia collusion, the allegation that Donald Trump was, let's just say, engaged in off-color behavior with prostitutes in a Russian hotel room. He knew that these things were not only untrue, he knew that they had been fabricated. They had been fabricated by the Hillary Clinton campaign. And how do we know that? Because they admitted to it. They actually had to pay a fine for it. By the way, no one went to prison. Nobody went to prison for fabricating these lies against Donald Trump. The campaign paid a fine for this. We know that the DOJ was involved in this eventually with Operation Crossfire Hurricane, I think it was called. Point is that Donald Trump, do you remember this in 2006? In 2016, he said, and he was lambasted for it, he said that his residence, that Trump Tower, was being bugged by the federal government. It turns out that he was right. He was right about almost everything. He said that the allegations were fabricated against him. They were fabricated. We know these are all factual, not disputable facts now. We all know it. And Comey was in this, or was very aware of all of these things that Donald Trump was talking about. So when you think about the Trump DOJ, by the way, you're right. If you're thinking this already, that they were no friends of Donald Trump, his own DOJ, you're 100% right. My point is this: he was the commander in chief. So to what extent did he try to pressure these people to prosecute Comey? Apparently not very much. And he could have removed people and put people into those positions to get maybe what he wanted, and maybe even what he was due, a prosecution against James Comey, but he didn't do it. But what do we have now? We have one party in multiple states and jurisdictions that are prosecuting or trying to prosecute Donald Trump. One party. But Donald Trump's DOJ in 2019 did not prosecute one of Donald Trump's most vicious political adversaries. Keep these things in mind, ladies and gentlemen. So Washington, the U.S. Department of Justice has decided not to prosecute former FBI Director James Comey despite an internal investigation that found he improperly leaked information to the news media, the department's internal watchdog said on Thursday. The Justice Department's Office of the Inspector General said Comey asked a friend to share the contents of a memo with the New York Times to pressure the department to launch an independent investigation into his conversations with President Donald Trump. I'm going to stop right there for a moment. This goes to the mindset of guilt, the mindset that you know you're doing something wrong when you yourself don't hand the memorandums to the news source. You have a go-between trying to set up a wall, an insulation between you and the behavior, and I'll say the quote-unquote crime. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly that it was certainly a violation of DOJ, FBA policy to share these memorandums. He knew it because the memorandums are the property of the FBI. You write those memorandums under the auspices of the FBI, they're the property of the FBI, and you cannot disseminate that without proper approval. He knew it then, he knows it now. In the memo, Comey described a meeting in which Trump allegedly asked him to drop the FBI's investigation into Michael Flynn, who at the time was his national security advisor. Comey signed off an investigation into the Trump campaign's possible ties to Russia during the 2016 election and later emerged as a prominent critic of President Trump. That is an understatement. After Trump fired him in 2017. The Justice Department appointed a special counsel, Robert Mueller, to handle the investigation after Comey left. The Inspector General said on Thursday that while Comey's memo did not contain classified material, he set a dangerous example when he shared sensitive information to create public pressure for official action. That was the first time that Comey stepped in it, I think legally, certainly administratively. Second time, it is the second time Comey's been criticized by the Inspector General's office, which concluded last year, again, this would be 2018, that he made a serious error of judgment when he announced shortly before the 2016 election that he was reopening an investigation into Democrat candidate Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server when she was Secretary of State. Now, I am of the absolute, I'm convinced the only reason Comey opened that investigation, the so-called investigation into Hillary Clinton and the email server, is because he knew, he had the mindset that it was going to end in nothing because he was controlling the investigation. He's the FBI director. This was a way for him to say to the public, hey, we looked at this, we're objective, no one's above the law, all that crap. I hate that because no one ever says no one's below the law who hates Donald Trump or who hates a conservative. He's not below the law. But anyway, this is why Comey did this. He opened that investigation so he could look like, he could pretend he was objective. He could pretend that Hillary Clinton was being scrutinized. And then, of course, he knew that at the end, he was not going to recommend any prosecution of Hillary Clinton, and that this was going to help her in the 2016 election. I say this is what I believe. I think it's pretty obvious, ladies and gentlemen. It pretty much speaks for itself. It's exactly what the whole process was there for. Comey wrote 7 memos during the first few months of Trump's presidency. I'm skipping over this so you don't have to hear the entire thing's article, detailing one-on-one meetings with the president. I wonder if he did this under the previous administration. I don't know. Maybe he did. I'm totally open to being educated. I wonder if he did. And I wonder if he leaked any of those memorandums from the previous administration to the media. I'm just asking the question. If you have the answer, please let me know. The Inspector General's office report said Comey should not have held on to the memos after he was fired because they were official FBI documents. So I said that earlier. I hadn't even got down this far. I did make a little note here. They belong to the FBI. Comey gave one of them to his friend Dan Richman and told him to share with the New York Times reporter. According to the report, Richman declined to comment. And I don't blame Richman one bit for declining to comment because he knows there's the consequences for what he did. Folks, what we are seeing today, not with just Donald Trump, but specifically and predominantly with Donald Trump, we are seeing the decline of the American system of blind justice. This is what we are witnessing. We are living in tremendously impactful and historic times. There are so many examples that I could talk about. But I'm trying to keep this podcast today to, a relatively short time. I want you to share this with everybody you can think of. And I want you to consider the people. They're not defending Donald Trump in a political sense. They don't want him reelected. They're not even defending him in a prosecution sense. They are trying to defend the process itself. They are trying to illustrate that the process, the foundation on which all of us rely to live in a free and open society, a society where we used to, for the most part, not fear political persecution, is disintegrating before our eyes. This is what Alan Dershowitz, this is what Mark Geragos, this is what a number of people on the left are trying to tell you. You can hate Donald Trump all you want. You can be happy and giddy that a jury came back with this ridiculous 34 counts of felonies against him. But if you're giddy about this, that you will be in tears when it happens to your guy or gal. You'll be in tears when it happens to someone close to you. And you'll be terrified when it happens to you yourself for being persecuted for something that you did not do. This is the door that has been opened. And if it's not closed very quickly, I don't know if we will survive. I'm not optimistic. I'm not pessimistic. I just don't know. But I'm doing my part here to get the information out and to try to squeeze a handful of people who can think objectively out there fairly. Take out your personal likes or dislikes for anybody, Donald Trump or anybody else, and look at the rule of law. Look, ladies and gentlemen, when the rule of law is used like this, it's not a rule at all. It's a tool. It's not a rule. It becomes a tool. It becomes a lever. It becomes a vehicle to quash the people with whom you disagree and to make them second-class citizens. And we cannot survive as a republic if we let this behavior stand. So please share this podcast with as many people as you can. As many people as you can. I don't care what their political affiliation is. I don't care what their political philosophies are. I don't care if they're your mom, your next door neighbor. Share this podcast. And each of us have to realize that the rule of law, as written in the Constitution, is there for a reason. It is to be a firewall between our emotions and what the truth is. We all have emotions. There are all people we would like to see put in prison for one thing or another, but they may not have done anything that's prosecutable, and so they shouldn't be. That's where I come down. I know it's where you come down, and we have to have other people come to that point in their lives where they hold the Constitution dear, the rule of law dear. Thanks for listening. God bless you. God bless America. God bless our political process. God bless this Constitution. I wish you all the best, and I will see you next time on Your Leo Nation.